Share International, which is his organization, gave a press release saying that there were going to be spectacular things happening in the following year, and that the Maitreya was going to emerge at some point, or so they believe. But this was a central doctrine surrounding FDR's administration. Henry Wallace and then Nicholas Roerich, who was this Russian guru, this mystic character, who was also a member of Blavatsky's Theosophical Society.
And a total globalist, by the way. I mean, this guy was all about globalism, and didn't he help bring in some of these different organizations?
Oh, sure. He helped with the founding of the League of Nations. Mm-hmm. And he's given credit for the League was dissolved because of World War II, and then he's credited with the formation of the United Nations afterwards. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there was this whole Roerich Peace Pact that was signed in the White House by Henry Wallace with FDR and so on. He was a very influential political figure, nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize and so on. He was lauded by political leaders around the world, especially in Tibet and the eastern countries and so on. There they celebrated him openly. And if you see his paintings, and we go to the Roerich Museum in New York and we show all of his paintings are all promoting, globalist ideas of unifying all the world religions, unifying all the countries of the world. And he was specifically working through the White House now when he went abroad toward creating or helping to create the Asian Union that we're seeing, come about now. But he was part of the whole groundworking of that movement during FDR's era. So he's promoting this idea of the Maitreya. When they built his building, called the Master Building in New York, they laid the cornerstone, and they put in there a piece of what he was calling the Stone of Destiny with an image of the Maitreya. Mm-hmm. They put an image of the Maitreya inside this cornerstone. And what's really bizarre about this, Jason, this wasn't just an event where they laid the cornerstone. They had dignitaries come from around the world, from Argentina, from Spain, from Romania, from all over the world. Albert Einstein sends a tribute. Henry Wallace is there. I mean, it's this major event in 1929, right before the stock market crash. But it was a very different environment in America, and it was a very mystical environment surrounding this guy Roerich, and they're all coming to see this Maitreya. So when you sent me these images of the Maitreya in the Bohemian Grove, I thought, oh my gosh, this really ties it all together. Mm-hmm. But this is the central theme for these secret occult groups that are manipulating our world political system. But they're doing it because they ultimately believe that all of their efforts are going to mystically, magically compel this person, whoever he will be, to come into the world. Now if you're a Christian, as I am, then you believe this figure is the Antichrist prophesied in the Bible. Mm-hmm. The false Messiah that's going to become the one world ruler. But there are these groups, and they have links that go to the most powerful offices in the world who are really trying to bring this to pass. And they're involved, as you described earlier, in these occult rituals, these satanic, mock human sacrifices. And some people even are reporting that they have real human sacrifices there in the Bohemian Grove. Although I haven't seen, full confirmation of that.
Sure, but just the fact that we're just now discussing that there's a Maitreya figure there, when obviously these photographs have been out there, and, mainstream media totally ignores the subject, and really the alternative media only knows what limited information is out there. It seems like this is a different section of the Grove. It seems like a different ritual goes on here, and it seems like, again, the elite are looking at this figure as, like you said, this coming Christ figure. What I don't understand is, where does it fit into Buddhism? Where does this Maitreya fit into Buddhism? Why are they the same? Why are they represented by the same figure?
Well, my understanding of it is, and it gets very complicated, even if you listen to them explain it. And then when you ask them questions, the ones who believe all of this, they themselves get confused. But it's the Maitreya is supposed to be the fifth incarnation of the original Buddha. Mm-hmm. That he has supposedly 5 incarnations. Gaetano Buddha was his name, and he claimed that he would have a 5th incarnation, and that would be his final incarnation. And so they have, throughout Eastern mysticism, they have believed that this would be that Jesus and Muhammad and Krishna and all of these different figures, they believe that they all were inspired by what they call the Christ principle or the Christ spirit or Christ consciousness. Mm-hmm. Okay, that they themselves were not Christs. They don't believe that Jesus is the Christ. They believe that he was just somebody who was inspired by this energy, but that the real Christ figure is the Buddha, is Maitreya Buddha, and that he will ultimately, when he comes into the world, he'll be a global Messiah that appeals to all the world religions and is able to unite all the world religions. That's what they believe.
It's just crazy to me that, some people will act like, oh, religion has no stance. We need to, especially in this movement, they'll say, oh, religion needs to go if we ever want to progress to man. But what they never really want to address is that those who are in the upper echelons of power, the true elite, they are religious, and their religion is this occult religion. And like you said, they do believe of the coming of this Maitreya figure. I mean, how can we get around that? How can we relate to people that, hey, even if you're not religious, even if you're secular, you don't subscribe to Christianity or Buddhism, or you're not a Muslim or a Jew, how do we get to those people that this is what they believe?
Yeah, that's a tough one. One of the arguments that I make is I try to explain to people that the whole doctrine, the idea of a separation of church and state, mm-hmm. People hear that and they think it means removing religion from government. And that's not what it means. What it means, if you study these societies, it means removing the church, i.e. Christianity, getting Christianity out of American government. But they want, like when you go into Washington, D.C., and you're seeing all of these god and goddess images and so on. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are all religious symbols.
Yeah, it's including the goddess Persephone, which is on the top of the Capitol building. A lot of people don't even realize that.
Right. You go out in front of the courthouse, they had this big deal in front of courthouses, right, getting rid of the 10 Commandments in front of the courthouse. Mm-hmm. But right next to the 10 Commandments, they have a statue of Themis, the blindfolded goddess holding the scales. Mm-hmm. That's the ancient goddess of justice. But nobody ever says anything about getting rid of her. The ACLU is not leading a crusade to get rid of all the religious iconography. They're just trying to get rid of Christianity or Judeo-Christianity, biblical values and teachings and so on. But all of the pagan stuff can remain. The all-seeing eye stays on the dollar bill. The Washington Monument's not going anywhere. Nobody's ever threatened the Statue of Liberty, even though Lady Liberty is based upon the Babylonian mother goddess of the ancient world. Mm-hmm. All of these are religious icons. And what they're doing is they're supplanting, they're getting rid of, just as they got rid of the teaching of creation in our schools, and then they put in this ancient Hindu belief about reincarnation, but they call it evolution, right? And they call it a science. And now that's what they're teaching in our schools. But evolutionary teaching doesn't have any scientific basis to it if you study it. It's all based in the ancient Hindu, Eastern mystical view about how, man begins as a tadpole or something, comes back as a frog, comes back as a goat, a dog, etc., and so on. And he's continually evolving upward toward godhood. That's where all of this stuff goes. And it is really what they believe. And they believe this is the true religion of the universe, as it were. Mm-hmm. And that anything that you're taught in the Bible is a counterfeit, or that it's been misunderstood by Christianity, as it were. So that's the real enemy for them. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, one of the things, just to support something that you guys talk a lot about, the idea of, Alex Jones says it's not about left or right, and I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I often tell people, say about George Bush, who presents himself as a Christian, and then he goes off and he's bowing down to this owl god out there in the Bohemian Grove. Mm-hmm. If the left-wing media really hated Bush, if they hated Bush and they wanted to stop him from becoming president, all they would have had to do is just run a week-long story on the Bohemian Grove that the Bush family's a part of it. They're bowing down to Buddhas and this 40-foot owl god of Molech, and there's no way evangelical Christians would have ever voted for George Bush. They would have never voted for him. And so, the manipulation does happen on the left and on the right. And it's like Jesse Ventura says in that clip you guys have, that it's like professional wrestling. Mm-hmm. They're putting on a show, but they're not telling you all the things that they could tell you. So it's, I feel bad for my fellow Christians in America because I feel